Kind of, but not really. Let's go this way. Alex. Huh? The right, kind of. Okay. Anyone at home think you know what absolute value means? Next one. Positive, negative number. I heard opposite. Okay. You guys are kind of on the right track. James? Yes. Okay. The absolute value, awesome, Avery, too. The distance away from zero. It's how far the numbers are away from zero. So absolute value is the distance away from zero. Okay. Now, when we talk about distance, okay, if I run around one lap around the track, okay, I have a positive distance. I went 1/4 of a mile, right? If I run backwards around the track, I still ran what? 1/4 of a mile. It doesn't matter whether I go forward or I go backwards, I am still going in a positive direction, right? Positive distance. So when you talk about absolute value, it is always positive because it is distance. Okay, so when you guys were saying opposite, yes, it's the opposite of a negative number, but when we have the opposite or the absolute value of a positive number, it is still going to be a positive number. Okay, can you put your computer and phone away, please? Thank you. Okay. So if you're looking at a number line here, okay, 0, we have our positive numbers to the right, our negative numbers to the left, okay? When I look at -2, -2 is how many units away from 0? 2. So it's a +2, and +2 is how many units away from 0? Still 2, right? So when we talk about the distance of 2, we actually have two numbers that are 2 units away from 0, right? Okay. So when we actually are getting ready to solve equations, these absolute value equations, we're always going to have it 9 times out of 10, we're always going to have 2 answers because they're always 2 numbers the same distance away from 0, isn't there? Yeah. Okay. So let's first do questions 1 through 4 here before we actually solve equations. The absolute value of 5. 5 is how many units away from 0? 5. Good. -3 is how many units away from 0? 3. Okay, so if you notice, 5 and -3 both gave us positive answers. It always will because we're talking about that distance. Now, in number 3, it's different because we have a problem inside the absolute value. So we have to do that problem first. So 3 minus 7 is? 3 minus 7 is? -4. And then the absolute value -4 is 4. So yes, the answer is 4, but we had to do the problem first, okay? And then in number 4, I'm not going to add first, am I? No, because I have the absolute value of just one number first, so I have to do that. So the absolute value of -3 is 3 because it's 3 units away from 0. And then 3 plus 7 is 10. Perfect. Now, what we're going to be starting to do is we're going to be looking at the absolute value of x is equal to 2. Okay, so we're looking in this sense that x, what value of x is 2 units away from 0? So x could be, how many numbers are 2 units away from 0? 2, right? So x could be what? X could be -2, and x could be +2. So 9 times out of 10, we're going to have 2 answers for these types of problems. Okay? All right. So an absolute value equation is an equation that contains an absolute value expression. Okay? Equation means it has an equal sign, right? So we can have different types. We can have the absolute value like x plus 1 equals 10. We could have problems like 2 times the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 5. okay? As long as we have an equation, an equal sign, and we have the absolute value. That's an absolute value equation. And again, 9 times out of 10, we're gonna have how many answers? 2, okay? 9 times out of 10, there's 2 answers, okay? All right, so let's talk about these absolute values again. We're gonna let A and B be real numbers. And we know what real numbers are, right? Pretty much any number you've talked about. Positive, negatives, decimals, fractions, anything, okay? So A and B can be any number that you've dealt with, okay? The absolute value of A is greater than or equal to 0. Is that true? If I take the absolute value of any number, we're gonna get what type of number again? Positive number. So isn't a positive number always greater than or equal to 0? Yeah, that should make sense to you, okay? Is the absolute value of A equal to the absolute value of negative A? Yeah, because the absolute value of any number is always positive. And if I have a positive, let's say absolute value of positive 2, is that equal to the absolute value of a negative 2? Yes, it is. Okay. The next one, is the absolute value of A times B equal to the absolute value of A times the absolute value of B? Well, let's think about it, okay? Let's do a problem. Give me a number for 2, or for A. 4. Give me a number for B. 3, let's do -3. Is that okay? All right. Now, if we're here, our A was 4, and then our B was -3. All right, so let's think about this. What's 4 times -3? -12. The absolute value of -12 is 12. You guys okay with that? All right, over here, what's the absolute value of 4? 4 times, what's the absolute value of -3? 3. And what's 4 times 3? 12. So does that work? Yes. Okay, so when it's a multiplication, it doesn't matter whether it's both inside or both individually in the absolute values. It's still going to be the same answer because when you take the absolute value, you're going to get a positive number, right? And you're still multiplying those. And then same thing with division. If I divide A by B, then take the absolute value, it's going to be the same thing as the absolute value of A over the absolute value of B. Okay, so it's kind of like the same idea here, but now it's just division. Why can't B equal 0? Why can't B equal 0? You can't divide a number by 0, okay? So that's why they say B can't equal 0. That's the only reason, okay? All right, now we're actually going to solve these, okay? So solving an absolute value equation, okay? The first step that you want to do is you want to isolate, can't even spell right now, sorry. So I teach math. Okay, we're going to isolate the absolute value equation. That means the absolute value should be the only thing on the left-hand side. So if I have a problem like this, 2 times the absolute value of like x plus 1 minus 6 equals 10. This absolute value should be the only thing on the left-hand side. So do you think I'm going to get rid of the 2 on the outside or the minus 6 on the outside first? The minus 6. We always move the constant over. We always do the adding, subtracting first, right? So how would I move that 6 over? I would add it. So I have 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 16. And then how do you think I'd get rid of that 2? Divide it. Perfect. So I'd get the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 8. Now is my absolute value isolated? Yeah. Okay. So that's what that means. Okay. Now, when my C is greater than 0, okay, my C is that equal sign. If it's greater than 0, so that means it's a positive number, right? We have to look at it. This absolute value, what number would get me 8 units away from 0? We could have what? What number is 8 units away from 0? 8 and -8. So we actually have 2 answers, don't we? Okay, so when x is greater than, or the answer is greater than 0, we are going to have two answers. Two answers. Okay? So we set whatever's inside the absolute value equal to a positive 8 and a negative 8, right? So what I would do in this problem, I'd take x plus 1 equal to 8 and x plus 1 equal a negative 8 because that absolute value is 8 units away from 0. So it could be a positive 8 or a negative 8. And then could I solve each of these? Yeah, how would I solve this? Subtract the 1, right? So x would equal, what's 8 minus 1? 7. And then negative 8 minus 1 is negative 9, okay? And the reason why this works, think about it. What's 7 plus 1? 8 is 8. The absolute value of 8, 8. If I plug in negative 9, what's negative 9 plus 8? Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that. What's negative 9 plus 1? Negative 8. And is the absolute value negative 8, 8? Yeah. Okay. All right. Last one here. Okay. Now, if C is less than 0, what numbers are less than 0? Negative numbers. Okay. So if, say, we have like the absolute value of x plus 1 is equal to negative 7. Okay. So if this answer is negative, how many numbers are negative 7 units away from 0? How many numbers are negative 7 units away from 0? Remember, we're talking about distance. Can distance be negative? No. So is there any number that is negative distance away from 0? No. So if this number is negative, we actually have no solution. We actually have no solution here. Okay? So we have no solution. So can you even solve it? No. Okay, so we have two answers. We have no solution. And technically, you can have one answer. What's the only number that is the same distance away from 0? 0, right? 0. The absolute value of 0 is going to be 0. There's no positive or negative of it, right? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and solve these. All right. So let's kind of look. All right. Is my absolute value the only thing on the left-hand side? Yeah, there's nothing on the outside of the absolute value, right? It's on the inside, okay? Then we look at my answer, and my answer is a positive 6, right? So then you ask yourself, okay, since that's positive, how many answers am I going to have? How many numbers are 6 units away from 0? 2. So we're going to have 2 answers, okay? So we have the x minus 4 twice. What numbers are 6 units away from 0? 6 and negative 6. Okay, now can we solve these? Yeah, so we got 2 equations we solve. So how do I solve for x over here? So solving for x, how do I move that 4 over? Add 4. So x equals 10. So that's my first answer. What would I do for the second one again? Add 4. The nice thing is the steps are always the same. The only difference is the answer. And what's negative 6 plus 4? Negative 2. Okay. And then should we always check it? Yeah, we probably should. Okay. What's 10 minus 4? 6. What's the absolute value of 6? Perfect. What's negative 2 minus 4? What's 2 minus 4? Negative 2 minus 4. Negative 6, and the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. So that works. So these are 2 answers. Now to graph, guys, all you have to do is graph, and I'm going to go by 2s on my number line, is we put a point at 10 and a point at -2. That's it. I'm not going to make you graph them all. All right. All right. Let's do number 5 next. Okay. Is my absolute value isolated? Is that the only thing on the left-hand side? Yes. Then we look at the answer, which is -5. Okay. How many answers or how many numbers are -5 units away from 0? 0. Since this is negative, it's supposed to be distance, and we can't take distance, right? So there is no solution. So do we have anything to solve here? Nope. Okay. Now to graph, I'll just show you to graph a no solution. Just put numbers on your number line, and you put absolutely nothing on it. That means no solution. Yes, ma'am. Huh? On which part? Okay, so if you're looking at -5 here, right? Okay, and we're taking the absolute value of what number would be -5, right? So absolute value, remember, is the distance away from 0. Can a distance ever be negative? How can a distance ever be negative? Well, let's think about it. If you are driving in a car or you're running, if I go forwards, I'm going a positive number of miles, right? If I run backwards, am I still adding miles to my car? Yes, we are. Yeah, so it doesn't matter. Like, do you wear a Fitbit or anything like count steps? Even if I'm walking backwards, I'm still adding steps to myself, right? So that's always a positive number. Okay, so no matter what, the absolute value should always be positive. Okay. Because there is no number I could plug in here that would give me a negative number. Because when I take the absolute value of that number, will it ever be negative? Well, the absolute value, what's the absolute value of 2? 2. What's the absolute value of 3? What's the absolute value of -2? 2. What's the absolute value of -3? It's 3, right? So do you see how after you said absolute value of each number is always a positive number? Whatever we plug in here, when I take the absolute value, would it ever be negative? You just told me every time you did an absolute value, isn't it always positive? Huh? Okay. We're going to keep going and then we'll work on it a little bit later, okay? All right, number 2. All right, is my absolute value isolated? Yes. Okay, because that's the only thing on the left-hand side. Now I look at this 4. Since it's positive, how many numbers are 4 units away from 0? 2, right? We have 2 numbers away from 0 that is 4 units, right? We have 4 and we have -4, okay? So now we're going to set up our 2 equations. We're going to take the x minus 1 and set it equal to what? 4 and -4. So 4 and -4, okay? Because 4 is 4 units from 0, -4 is 4 units away from 0, right? Now, how do I solve for x here? Add 1 to both sides. So x equals, and 4 plus 1 is? And then the other side, plus 1 again. We always add 1, and x is going to be -3. Okay. Now, if we graph, we would put a point at 5, and we put a point at -3. Okay. Now, we can always check. What's 5 minus 1? 4, absolute value of 4? 4, good. -3 minus 1? -4, and absolute value -4? 4, good. All right, number 6. Is my absolute value isolated? No. Why? Because what else do we have on that side? minus 10. So how do I move that minus 10 over? Add the 10. So we have the absolute value of 3x minus 9 equals, because this cancels, what's negative 4 plus 10? All right. Now is my absolute value isolated? Yes. Okay, because that's on the inside. And then let's look at my answer. How many numbers are 6 units away from 0? 2. So we're going to have 2 answers. So we're going to take that 3x minus 9 and set it equal to a positive 6 and a negative 6, because both of those numbers are 6 units away from 0. Okay. Now, solving for x, we got 2 equations. What would I move first? Would I move the 3 or the 9? 9, so add the 9. So 3x equals 15. And then what? Divide by 3. So x would be 5. So that's my first answer. All right, the second side, same step. So what's my first step? Add 9. The only difference is the number changes on the the right side. So what's a negative 6 plus 9? 3. Then divide by 3. So x would equal 1. So when I plug in 5 here, I'm going to get a positive 6. And the absolute value of a positive 6 is 6, which is great. When I plug in the 1, I actually get negative 6. And what's the absolute value of negative 6? 6 still. Okay. All right. All right, number 3 here. All right, looking at my absolute value, which is 2x plus 7. Is that isolated? No, because we have that 4. So how do I get rid of that 4? We divide it. We don't distribute it because this is not a parenthesis, it's absolute value. Okay, so we're going to get the 4's cancel, and I have the absolute value of 2x plus 7 equals 4. Okay. Now is my absolute value isolated? Yes. Okay. The 4, it's positive. So we have 2 numbers that are 4 units away from 0, right? So I have 2 answers. So I'm going to take that 2x plus 7. What's the first number? 4, because it's 4 units. And what's my second number? Negative 4, because it's negative 4 units. It's still 4 units away from 0. And now we solve. So solving for x, would I move the 2 or the 7 first? 7, and how do I move a plus 7? Minus it. So we get 2x equals negative 3, great. And then how do we get rid of that 2? Divide by 2. So x equals, can I divide negative 3 by 2? No, so we leave it as negative 3 over 2. So if I plug negative 3 over 2 there, I'm going to get a positive 4, and the absolute value of a positive 4 is 4. Okay. All right, let's solve the next side. Am I going to move the 2 or the 7 again? 7. So I get 2x equals negative 11. And then how do I get rid of the 2? Divide by 2. And can I divide negative 11 by 2? Nope, so we leave it as negative 11 over 2. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, number 7. Is my absolute value isolated? No, we have that negative 4 being multiplied, and we have that plus 8. Excuse me. Would I move the negative 4 or the plus 8 first? Negative 4. Would I move the negative 4? Do I multiply? Okay. Or would I move the plus 8 first? Well, let's think about this. If I just had a problem like this, negative 4x plus 8, equals negative 16. What would I move first? The 8. We always, always, always move the constant first, okay? The coefficient, when you're multiplying it, that's your coefficient. You always do that last, okay? So how would I move that plus 8 over? Minus 8. We have negative 4, absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals negative, nope, negative 24, good. Because they're both negative, you add, right? Now, how do I get rid of that negative 4 as a coefficient? We divide by negative 4. Okay. So now we have the absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals what? Positive 6. Yeah, positive 6. Now, is my absolute value isolated? Yes, that's great. Now, look at your answer, which is a plus 6. So do we have numbers that are 6 units away from 0? Yes. How many of them? We have 2. And what are my 2 answers? 6 and negative 6. So then we're going to put the 3x minus 1 in front. And then we solve. Okay. I don't know why that's moving. Move with it. All right. All right, solving for 3x. Am I going to move the 3 or the 1 first? The 1. And how would I do that? Add 1. Good. So we have 3x equals 7. And then what? Divide by 3. Great. And can I divide 7 by 3? No, so we leave it as 7 over 3. So if I plug 7 over 3 there, I'm going to get a positive 6. And the absolute value of a positive 6 is 6. Great. All right, other side. What would I do first? Add 1, which is always the same steps. The only difference is the answer side. Negative 6 plus 1, negative 5. And then how do I get rid of that 3? 5 by 3. So x equals negative 5/3. Good. So if I plug negative 5/3 in, I'm going to get a negative 6. And the absolute value in negative 6 is 6. Okay. All right, and then 1 here. And then I do want to add another problem, okay? And there's a reason being, okay? All right, is my absolute value isolated here? No. We have to get rid of that negative 2. And how would I get rid of that negative 2? We divide it. So the negative 2's cancel, and I'm left with the absolute value of 5x minus 1 equals, what's 10 divided by negative 2? Negative 5. All right, is my absolute value isolated now? Yes. Now we look at our answer, and we have a negative 5. Is there a number that is the distance of negative 5 units away from 0? No. Okay, you cannot have a negative distance, right? So what is my solution? There is no solution. Okay, there's no solution. Because as soon as you see this negative 5, you cannot take the absolute value of anything that's going to be a negative number, is it? Because it's distance. Negative 5 is not a distance. Okay, so that is no solution. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and add one more here. Okay, so I don't know what number we're on. Is that 7, 8? All right, so number 8. And because I'm making it up, you're probably going to have a fraction, just so you know. Okay, so we have 2x minus 1, the absolute value, equals, let's do 5x plus 1. Okay. All right, what's different with this one than the other ones? We have 2 x's, right? Okay, we can even put absolute values on both sides here, okay? Now, when we do this, we're still going to set up the exact same way. The only difference is this side, the right side, whether it's in absolute values or not, we have to put them in parentheses when we make the negative sense of it, okay? Always. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to take this 2x minus 1, and that is never going to change. Okay? It's not going to change. Now, we don't have a positive or negative side of this, so we're always going to have two solutions to start out with, okay? Now, our positive answer is just a positive answer. It's 5x plus 1. When we need the negative answer, we put it in parentheses. And why do you think I have to put it in parentheses? Because we have to do that first. Yes, we have to distribute the negative. We want everything to change signs. And the only way everything will change signs is if we distribute that negative through, right? Okay. So let's first go ahead and solve this side here, okay? Do you guys want to move the 2x or the 5x? The 2x, and how would I move a 2x to that side? So I have a negative 1 equals, what's 5x minus 2x? 3x plus 1. And then what? Subtract the 1. And what's negative 1 minus 1? Negative 2 equals 3x. And then what? Divide by 3. So x would equal negative 2 over 3. Okay? Now, okay, we'll do the other side, and then there's one thing we have to do with this one. So what's my next step here? What would be my first step in the other equation? Distribute. So we have 2x minus 1 equals, what's a negative times a positive 5x? Negative 5x. What's a negative times a positive 1? Negative 1. Okay. Now, do you guys want to move the 2x or the negative 5x? Okay. I would move the 5x. Do you guys want positive numbers or negative numbers? Positive. So how would I move a negative 5x over? Wouldn't I add it? So it's 2x plus 5x. 7x minus 1 equals negative 1. And then what? Add 1. So 7x equals 0. Then what? Divide by 7. And what's 0 divided by 7? 0. Okay. Now we have our two answers. But because we have a variable on the other side here, I mean, we should always check, but you need to definitely check here because there's such things as known as an extraneous solution. Extraneous solution. An extraneous solution means when you solve it out, it looks like an answer. But when I plug it in, it actually doesn't work. Okay? And the reason being is because think about this. If I take the absolute value of any number, it's supposed to be what? Positive. Sometimes when I plug a number in, I might end up on this side as a negative number. Would that ever work? No. So which one do we want to try first? Because we got to try both of them. Probably 0. Wouldn't 0 be better? All right. Let's plug 0 in first, okay? Oops, sorry. Let's plug 0 in first. What's 2 times 0? 0. 0 minus 1? Minus 1, sorry. And what's the absolute value of negative 1? 1. Okay, so we have 1 on that side. Whoa, what did I just do? 1. Does 1 equal 1? Yes, we're good. Now it's that fraction one that we have to work with, which is a little bit more challenging, right? All right, so let me. All right, so let's do this negative 2/3. All right, so we have 2 times a negative 2/3 minus 1. Okay, 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1, right? So it's 2 times negative 2, negative 4 over, what's 1 times 3? 3. Now, minus 1, we have to have common denominators, right? Isn't 1 the same thing as 3 over 3? Yeah. So what's a negative 4 minus 3? Or a negative 4 plus a negative 3? negative 7 over 3, right? And the absolute value of negative 7 over 3 is a positive 7 over 3. Are you guys okay with that? Now let's do the other side, the 5x plus 1. All right, let me change colors here. So we have 5 times negative 2/3 plus 1. What's 5 times negative 2? Negative 10 over 3 plus 1 is the same thing as that 3 over 3. So what's negative 10 plus 3? Negative 7 over 3. Is 7 over 3 equal to a negative 7 over 3? No. So is negative 2/3 an actual solution? No. So this here is known as an extraneous solution. Okay? This is actually my true solution is 0. The only time you really have to check that is if you have variables on both sides. That's it. Okay? And honestly, if there's no absolute value on this side, I always plug in my negatives first because that's probably going to be your extraneous solution. 9 times out of 10, not always, but a lot of times it is. Okay? All right, is there any questions? All right, any questions? Anyone at home have some questions? Any questions at home?